Hi guys, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Julio?
Good. Um,
Welcome, everyone that's coming into the spaces. We are going to get started in just a couple minutes here. Thanks for joining.
Hey everyone.
Hey there, John. I see you waving in the Twitter space. Great to see you. I've been loving your tweets about story lately. Thanks for joining.
All right, I've been demoted to speaker.
I was promoted by the looks of it, so
Congrats.
All right. Yeah. Welcoming everybody. We're just going to wait 1 or 2 more minutes here while we get some people to join, and then we'll kick off our discussion today.
We're also recording this via video as well. So after this live Twitter space, we'll also have the opportunity to see the two beautiful speakers I have with me. All right, let's wait for it to get to one past. All right, one past. We officially gave a 60-second delay for everyone to join, and I think it's perfect time to get started. So welcome everyone to the first official Proof of Creativity Twitter space / podcast. As I mentioned earlier, we are recording both at the same time. The goal of this Proof of Creativity episode really is to dig into the world of franchise building, IP building, especially in the context of gaming, and of course in the context of Web3. With me today, I have Jacob and our honored guest, Julio from Pixelmon. I will let them introduce themselves, but I do want to give a very special thank you to Julio, who not only is the CEO of Pixelmon, but also the co-founder of LiquidX, that has taken on the risky endeavor of being the guinea pig for this podcast series. We're really excited to have you, and there's so much that we have to talk about today. I'll start with introducing myself, and then I'll hand it over to you guys to introduce you. My name is Andrea. I'm a DevRel here at Story Protocol. Before that, I was at Dapper Labs, and before that, even I was at Amazon. I've been in the Web3 space for a bit. I have a couple side projects. I love building stuff, and when I found out about Story Protocol, it all just clicked and it all made sense. I'm a big fan in finding utility and finding real world applications for a space that is, you know, sometimes lacking that in a lot of areas. And this is why I also think the guest that we have here today is also a perfect fit. But I'll hand it over to Jacob to also introduce himself as a co-host, and then Julio will hand it over to you.
Hey everybody, Jacob here. Thanks Andrea for passing the torch. I'll keep it short because I really want to give Julio the spotlight here. But like Andrea, I am on the developer relations team at Story Protocol. I joined only a couple months ago, but I'm super excited to be here. And you know, I also for today's space, I play a ton of video games myself that involve a lot of world building, lore, like League of Legends. So definitely curious to dive into some of those topics today with Julio. Yeah, Julio, do you mind just giving a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, guys, first of all, and good morning to everyone. It took me 2 years to get into the good morning thing, yeah. I was, the boomer web tour in me deeply refused it for a while, and now I good morning, everybody.
But you're still saying good morning and not GM, so that's already like a step.
That's the next step, if I'll ever get there. But jokes aside, no, look, thank you for having me. I still recall, you know, picking up some of the early press announcements and actually vibe through some chat groups of Story Protocol, and being, even before it was public, very excited by what it was planning to build. You know, full. Finally, you know, one of the first big protocols for application layer enablement within IP. Not many. Oh, it was about an introduction, actually, no, wasn't it? So, so yeah, I'm the founder of LiquidX, but we're much better known. That's our holding company. We're much better known for the Pixelmon IP and the Mon protocol publishing unit of it. We are essentially Web2 builders. So me and my co-founder come from previous founder careers. He was a founder in the VC space. So he built a sizable 300 million AUM VC. And from there went into gaming and blockchain investing. I come from the consumer tech space. So I built 2 e-commerce companies. IPO'd one of them. The second one is at Series B at this moment in time. I have a non-operational role on both, having stepped out after 10 years in those roles, and launched myself into the blockchain gaming space with pretty much one kind of principle that me and my co-founders had, which was, we believed back in 2020 that the next wave of adoption of the blockchain would be by taking on-chain things people use and love for non-speculative reasons, which I think in a wide nutshell is IP. So we really thought, okay, the next wave of adoption of the blockchain is going to be bringing IP and IP use cases on chain. And hence we started building in the anime space and in the blockchain gaming space. We like being guinea pigs for new things, so we went and acquired the Pixelmon collection when everybody thought that nobody should touch it with a 10-foot pole. There's a bit of history there, and we've been building ever since. And now we've got a number of games out, community strong, over 1 million, anime studios, gaming studios. We love this space.
That's awesome. I'd actually love to double click onto what you alluded. You said like no one was really interested in the IP. I'd love to hear what you saw in it and what made you decide, hey, this is worth investing in and turning around completely.
So I think, just maybe for context of everybody, the Pixelmon was one of the probably most successful NFT mints back in the 2021-2022 cycle. It minted 21,000 ETH, but it was also the least successful art reveal of the same cycle. So within 2 weeks of that, it completely crashed, various accusations, but essentially it was considered a FUD project. Or a so-called soft rug, so a situation where nobody had run with the money was there, but nothing was being done. And here struck along the two guys that, yeah, we had been very involved in the DeFi side of things as angel investors, but we didn't really understand crypto Twitter, if I have to be totally honest, back in 2021. And since this looked like, oh, an amazing distressed asset. It's an IP about monster collecting, and monster collecting is the biggest let's say, sector when it comes to consumer IPs. Pokemon is the biggest consumer IP in the world. 2x Mickey Mouse and Friends in 1/3 of the time. 10x Star Trek in half the time. Revenue to date. A huge community. There's 100,000 people there. And when you go into the Discord, they're not saying money back. In Discord, they were saying when game. Well, like, okay, they want... and you know, assets there because, you know, the community, those funds were there for that project. And to us, it looked like an amazing idea. Now, after doing it, we started realizing that there was crypto Twitter to deal with. But I think we dealt with it. And naivety is what, you know, if you know how hard a task is, you probably won't do it, is what most entrepreneurs say. So the short answer is we didn't know how hard it would be.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you say you didn't know much about crypto Twitter. I'm still trying to figure that out myself nowadays. I think we all are. One thing I'm really curious to ask you is, you know, before we sort of dive into the actual IP of Pixelmon and all that kind of stuff, do you mind just giving a brief overview for the listeners here about what Pixelmon is?
Yeah, so Pixelmon is a NFT native. So it was born with an NFT collection of a couple of hundred monster designs. Monster collecting IP. So monster collecting IP is a sophisticated way of saying it's the genre in which Pokemon, Digimon, and those guys were positioned. We try and differentiate ourselves from a IP standpoint by saying we want to be 18 to 35 targeted. So meaning we want to be edgier, a little bit more violent. We want to be for a more adult crowd. We effectively want to cater to those guys that used to be Pokemon fans. They are still Pokemon nostalgics, but the products are not for their age group anymore. And the second layer of differentiation is we're building on blockchain native products. So we want all of those extra layers of interaction for gamers and community members. The other super short way of saying this is Game of Thrones, Pokemon, mash them together. You have a medieval violent world with monsters that you can capture. And you can ride dragons.
It's perfect combo. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, exactly. I absolutely love the idea, and I totally resonate with what you're describing. I used to play Pokemon all the time as a kid, every weekend. My mom even had to take away my DS at the time because I was playing it too much. But like you're totally right. As new games have come out nowadays, I feel like I've sort of grown beyond that. But it was almost like an introduction into anime culture or to manga culture, which I'm super into nowadays. So it's great to hear that you sort of have that context in mind. So, you know, we're sort of talking about, you know, a lot of different, like, you know, types of media in this space. But I really want to dive into, so, you know, Pixelmon, obviously a very, very gaming native, blockchain native. What other types of, you know, sort of media are you thinking about? You know, whether it's games or, you know, maybe even like there's a whole wiki, you know, how do we imagine the Pixelmon universe?
Yeah. So, look, I think if we want to bring, let me backtrack. So I think there's two sides to this. We are building an IP, not a game. And that for us means we need to be cross-channel. Cross-channel means we need to have products for mobile apps. We need to have browser-native gaming products. We need to have desktop application-native products. So that's already 3 types of games there. We need to short-form content, so short teasers. we need to have, at some point in time, long-form content. So think an anime series, whatever, 3D series, animation series, essentially. And we need to have deep lore, because people need to really be able to immerse themselves. So the written side of things online. And we've decided to go the hard path and build all of this rather than build one great game loop and then triple invest in it. We've, for example, released one browser game a couple of months ago, super successful, 500,000 players in the first month, over 100,000 DAUs. We could have kept double, triple, quadruple clicking on it. But yeah, while that goes, we are already releasing another one in 2 weeks and then releasing a Epic Store game. And in the meantime, running tests with large communities on Steam for our dungeon crawler. So that's one point of it. But if you take instead the other, like, we need to bring people to Web3 games. So I think that we're starting to get to a point where there's a lot of product out there now. You would have not said this 2 years ago. Now there's a lot of product out there. But distribution is still a concern. If your game is on chain or parts of it are on chain, you can't be on Steam. So I think that positions you in a place where you need to do a lot more on app for distribution, but you have best experience of the on-chain part on desktop. And I think we need to get into long-form blockchain games need to create non-blockchain content to be able to then make people enter through that and then make the jump. Think PUBG. PUBG is starting with toys. Yeah, they've got one or two that have the chip in it, but most don't. That for me is like, that's why we need to have an anime. Because you put an anime on Netflix and then that is your biggest marketing driver for your blockchain game. Yeah, that's a long way of answering your question.
And, you know, in creating a universe of IP, first of all, I'd love to find out more about how you actually decide how to split up the IP across different types of games even, right? You have different game types. You have the hardcore games, you have the clicker games, but even more so, like, how do you think of an IP being company-driven by Pixelmon and community-driven by the actual players, and how do you facilitate that?
So part of me wishes we had the kind of tools you guys are building when we first started 2 years ago. But I think we started it we tried to be as community-driven in building the IP as possible. And we did that using, brute force. And the brute force was just, okay, we've got a big community. They like what we're doing. We started segregating them based on interest across Discord channels. So literally sub channels to the server, from lore building to voting on concept art, to proposing changes to concept art, to proposing changes to 3D art, to game testing. And so we've been doing it in that way quite, let's say, clunkily. But the overall, let's say, guiding principle is, if you can build a framework and that framework is clear enough, then you can let people build within the framework. And framework is an ugly word to say, just create the context. Like, it's a world with this level of technology where people don't fly, you don't have Super Saiyans, but you do have dragons and Pixelmons. And then have certain parts where a storyteller can come in and tell an entire story within that framework of rules without even having to interact with you. Where fan art can become great, where fan art can be minted in some shape or form. And instead, the parts where it is about the rules have a collaborative process where people are able to vote, contribute, and get to a finalized outcome. Everybody in our Discord, well, not everybody, but we've distributed, I think, around 17,000 community badges. Badges means you've contributed in some way to the IP. Badges are going to be part of our airdrops as much as our NFTs, our pre-sales, and everything else, because we want to reward collaborative building, and we will keep doing this. So the whole ecosystem is geared around incentivizing it.
So how does that actually work? So when you have a huge community that is really interested in contributing IP, to the Pixelmon universe, how do you sort of regulate what gets added and what doesn't? Because I imagine there's a ton of concepts and creativity out there, but ultimately only a select number might want to end up in the game. And so how is that process actually regulated?
So to be frank with you, in a way that is just as structured as you can with the tools we've got. But the main, I think, filter for us comes to who joins which groups. Because once you are in the tester group, it is a more restricted group where you can actually propose changes to gameplay, and where the game designers are incentivized heavily to read everything, and each period of time I'd provide a structured answer where they say why certain things they're not doing in them, but they have considered them. Similarly for lore, similarly for character design, concept art. Now, where this process is the weakest is at the point of entering the groups. So, because that is a very subjective process that is driven by us, our mod team, and everybody else, just finding the community member that is really interested in something, that really can contribute to something. An ideal scenario would have been us building a ton of tech surrounding it, some mini DAOs and filtering mechanisms, but that's not our core business. Our core business is making games and distributing them. I think we're chatting here because somebody is building all of that, and it might come in useful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the whole thesis that we are actually building around is how do we make IP programmable in a way that it doesn't work against you. I think a lot of the friction holding back IP today is it's always locked behind binders in law offices and hard to access, hard to find. You need to know the right people. You need to get into the room with the right people. It requires a bunch of conversations back and forth. Whereas if things are programmatically created and transparently exposed, right? So I want to make a contribution to a piece of IP that I love, right? I'm a very avid Pixelmon gamer, and I'd love to put my unique spin on part of the lore, or as you were saying, like the actual world building. I want to add an ingredient to it. And I would feel a lot more comfortable doing that if I know that, hey, regardless of how this is used, I can set my terms transparently, and anyone who wants to use it, whether it's the Pixelmon team or whether it's someone else building a spin-off game, they know exactly what my rules are, and they don't even have to reach out to me, right? I can basically set the rules out front, and everyone who comes by can say, yeah, I think I'll take that and run with it. And I really think this can be a huge unlock for collaborative story building. I really loved your point about world building versus storylines. Storylines are very prescriptive. World building is very open-ended, and that is, I think, the true way to build a community. Right? Is you give them a playground versus giving them a start to finish. I have a slightly more on the game building side. Obviously, as a dev, the building side is what really interests me. In a world where there's more and more games being published on Steam, where it's harder and harder to capture attention, and the ease of accessibility to building a game is going down, I think, and correct me if you don't agree, I think the real differentiator is the IP layer, right? Anyone can build a game, but not everyone can build a game on a strong IP, and also it's the end polish that really sets a game apart. I'd love to hear how your team is thinking about doing, about separating above all of the noise. How do you cut through the noise and create a game that is not just any other game, but is something special?
I think your You're mostly right. Thanks to the type of tools that we have, every year, well, every new edition of Unreal Engine, effectively building games becomes in some way easier. But at the same time, as you say, competition accelerates at the same pace. So it's not enough to be able to say, oh yeah, I created a map that is X square kilometers, hence my game is great, because a lot of people can do that. And then you start seeing that the games that differentiate themselves have in common less and less the kind of AAA, oh, I've just put 200 million into content, because content is now accelerating too, because a smart team can make their monsters on an AI program, and make them fast, can make their world in an AI program. It's still more complicated than that sometimes, but we're getting there, certainly. So the AAA mantra of we're going to invest more than anyone else and hence our game is better is the content war. First of all, it's the lowest ROI you can have in gaming. And second of all, it's that playing field is leveling out too. And so, yes, you're right. You're either you either have an IP, and hence you are already in people's hearts. But even having an IP doesn't make for a great game by itself. Pokemon Unite is a successful game, but is nowhere near as successful as other MOBAs, even if it started from a stronger IP. Instead, what becomes really, I think, sticky is two things: storytelling in game and game loops, game design. So I think what we've done is effectively reshifted the weight inside gaming from tech and 3D art as competitive differentiators back to designers and storytellers as competitive differentiators. So ultimately, the most balanced game with the best game loop and the stickiest game loop that is innovative, and the story that makes you the conversations between in God of War, between the father and the kid, those kind of things then become touching. And this is what we are realizing, that effectively everybody can throw 10, 50, whatever million into a game. Your game has to stand out differently. Over-index on designers, over-index on storyline. Now, being Web3 gives you another edge, because there's a lot of unexplored and tested loops and innovations there. So that's a third edge. IP generically without storytelling, I think, is great for distribution. I don't know if it makes the long-term success of the game better. I think it gets you maybe the first million users faster. But will they stick for a long time? Depends.
So I'm really curious to get your thoughts around, you talk about all the different intricacies of gaming, whether it be the characters, the world, the skins, or even something like you mentioned, as small as like a conversation between two characters. How do you judge, what actually ends up being an IP and what belongs to the game? And maybe this has impacts on maybe what can be brought into other games as well. But how do you sort of determine, what should be sort of represented as IP and what isn't, and what's important to the game and what isn't?
I think it's a game by game decision. The reality is gamers like storylines if they don't interrupt the game too much. so the whatever can follow you the right way through whatever is an interactive storyline is actually a lot more interesting than a non-interactive one. Hyper casual games, frankly, you don't put that much of it in for obvious reasons. In our mid-core games, we put a lot more of it in. What we are playing with, which is quite interesting, we're trying to create 2D content and then insert it in the game as cutscenes. So then you have essentially a little bit of the anime pulled into the game, and some content mixing. It's not that new. I haven't seen it done in Web3 games, but I've seen it done in some Japanese and Korean games. A particularly successful game was Seven Deadly Sins Grand Cross. Interestingly, also an IP spin-off from the anime world. Very, very nicely made Marble X game. Yeah, but look, I think you have to be careful. Ultimately, people are playing because they want an active medium, not a passive one. If not, they'd be watching TV. But mix them enough to create a storyline without interrupting. I think some of the stuff that is coming through AI, by the way, which is the ability to interact with other characters with an LLM behind them, is super interesting. So you being able to actually have a conversation with it is very, very interesting.
And I think it's going to also open up a lot of interesting IP questions, right? So obviously, fine-tuned model around a game lore will be a piece of IP that generates pieces of IP, and these pieces of IP could end up going into training data for other models. So I think the tracking of attribution, the tracking of IP across not only user-generated content, but also AI-generated content is going to be even more important as time goes on. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts around just this new era of AI generation, where it's getting to a point that it starts to become indistinguishable, right? I don't think we're there yet, 100%, but of course, everyone's seen the latest OpenAI demos. They're pretty scary. What were your immediate reactions, not only on the IP side, but also on the how can this be leveraged in the game to make it more fun?
Yeah, so I think when I first saw the first version of ChatGPT and we started thinking about conversations with NPCs, it was great. It was interesting. I was like, oh, I had conversations with NPC, but conversations with NPCs, unless you design the entire game around that concept, are still cherries on the cake. What everybody was saying was, well, what we really need is being able to create real-time rendered content with AI. So this is where it gets complex. Now, so the big difference between animation, videos, and gaming is you're rendering real-time. And in gaming. Now, and rendering real-time is a completely different ballpark in terms of optimization from rendering non-real-time. Because, and when I say rendering, I mean the actual creation of 3D environments, videos, whatever interacts with you on your screen and on your sound. Because it needs to be super optimized. So the speed at which the AI needs to generate that can't have any lag. So everybody in gaming was like, unless this gets to the point of zero lag, it doesn't help us. So our biggest reaction and wow moment was when, not wow, but was when we started seeing Sora. Because now Sora is still processing not real time, but imagine if you can get it to the point, and this is, I think it'll get to the point that it will render real time. But imagine if you get it even just to the point where a cutscene is generated with Sora. And you have, okay, as a gamer, I can wait 10 seconds for that. The game might even know that you're getting to it and let you do something while it generates the cutscene in the background. So basically, let's imagine a scenario where in the 20 seconds pre-cutscene, you're doing things that don't impact the cutscene, but in the 10 minutes before the cutscene, you're doing things that feed information to the cutscene generation. And then you have a cutscene which is actually the result of information from what the player did. There was a lot of, take a step back, there was a huge excitement in the gaming community when we started having cutscenes where the character inside the cutscene looked the way you had customized him. So if you had given him long hair in the cutscene, he's got long hair. That was wow. But in reality, what the programmers were doing there, they were just replacing the one asset of the character in the generation. And and generating it at the level of definition, by the way, of the game, not at a high level of definition as pre-rendered cutscenes. Imagine doing all of that now, but it's way more than just a character. And it's rendered at a level of definition of top layer animation. That makes me very excited, because that's the first step towards the entire world generation. So, AI for procedural map generation has existed in gaming pretty much since Age of Empires let you customize the map when I was a kid. And it was called AI, but yeah, it's in a simplistic way. But now imagine that, and I haven't been speaking to teams where the entire world is procedurally generated and keeps generating itself based on the players in it. And it doesn't need to be one player, it can be an MMO. So it can be multiple players. I'm going to shield somebody. You guys should take a look at Avalon, a gaming team in the US. They're going that direction. It's really exciting. Imagine Minecraft meets a Cyberpunk meets World of Warcraft with the graphics of Assassin's Creed, but AI is everywhere. Sorry, you got me on a rant, but if I think about Pixelmon, if I think about Pixelmon, think about sub-character development. So there's a lot of talk about AI agents, no? And AI agents are particularly interesting. All the games that I've seen with AI agents, why they're really interesting? Because there's a lot of people like me that have gotten to a stage in life where they don't have that much time to play games, but they love games. AI agents allow us to play active games as if they were idle games, which is very interesting for me. I don't like idle games. I like active games. I don't have the time or concentration for active games. They're finding this middle ground. The parallel team in Web3 is leading. There's so many of them. Now, imagine an application of AI agents in the Pokemon, Pixelmon, monster collecting context. You're not developing linearly a character anymore. So it's not about taking, I imagine one of my characters, I don't want to use Pikachu all the time, Borgenberg. You can develop Borgenberg, you can make them stronger, you can give them shields, you can make them more loyal, you can make them like you more, la 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 la. It's all linear though, isn't it? Now imagine if instead Borgenberg are an individual LLM for each player, and each monster is an individual LLM. Maybe I'm using the LLM term wrongly, but anyways, an individual learning personality. What you're doing is you're really training creatures from a personality perspective, from a combat behavior perspective, and plus all the so-called incremental linear strengths and weaknesses and etc. Imagine then next step, if those creatures are NFTs. So those AI agents, each one is an NFT. And after you trained them, you could sell them. So imagine you've got an advanced player that teaches his Borg to fight in very specific ways, jump around, active gameplay. Forget you've got free choices, turn-based. You can take one environment where I train him to fight, and I'm controlling the character, where I train him to speak, I train him to react, and then another environment where he follows me, I'm active, I'm the human, and what he does independently based on what I taught him. So, and then, because I'm a really good player, I sell that character as an NFT to Jacob. And then every single one is different in a profound, multi-variable, non-linear way. That's the game I want to build next.
And just to jump into that, I think there's a huge potential there as well to blur the lines between games. I think like condensing whatever form of training we want to say into a model that then gets packaged as an NFT, or at least represented as an NFT that then gets sold, is a great way to share across people. But I think also as a player, also going back to the world building within Pixelmon, wouldn't it be great if an agent or a model that a character represents comes with me to another game. And maybe it has a different role in the new game. You know, maybe in one game it's like the narrator voice. In another game, it's a companion. In another game, it's a special character that you unlock at the end. But you're actually bringing with you your past experience, and all the future games in which this model will be part of will actually, remember all of your past experiences. And I think that will go a long way into making gamers feel like they're part of the game, like actually part of the game, not just a slogan. The in the game slogan, right? But this time for real.
Yeah, but look, the other step in 3 years ago, we were telling each other. I was looking at some of the speeches by Yatsu on essentially cross use of assets across games. So interoperability was a big word. And I was still blind. First of all, I was blind to the capabilities of Epic. I'm a massive fan of Epic from a tech standpoint, Epic Games. That product is insane. It's the biggest. I've been in the tech industry for 13 years. Unreal Engine is the most insane product I've ever seen. OpenAI is innovating on AI, but UE is just it's just a world. But anyways, so, and secondly, we couldn't imagine, many of us couldn't imagine how far ahead the AI teams had gotten. And we were all saying, yeah, but every game has different definitions, different rules, different poly count, different movement mechanics. You can't really just shift assets around because they're going to have to be rebuilt, and every rebuilding takes a week for one asset. Lumen is pretty much 80% there, which is a sub-product in UE already, in just saying, feed me an asset. I'll do everything that needs it to go into the rules of another game. So I think we're getting very close to the point where interoperability is going to be really just plug and play, as long as the other ecosystem opens up the doors to me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up Epic, because I could talk about this for forever. I find it so fascinating too. Even really popular games like Fortnite, it's incredible what they're doing with external IP. I mean, they're hosting concerts directly in the game that's all rendered, and it's a song that someone made on TikTok, or it's a anime character for Attack on Titan from like a super popular anime. And they're bringing them into Epic Games and rendering them in the game, and people are spending millions and millions and millions of dollars purchasing these skins and these songs and these assets all in the game. But when you think about it, it's like Epic Games they're at such a large scale that they're able to make these sort of deals, right? And it's like, how can we greater open these horizons to smaller studios, to other games and other mediums. And that's I think exactly what you're talking about, where hopefully with stuff that's being built at Story, like being able to bring things to cross medium. I also and then going off that, I wanted to ask you, what is sort of your thoughts around Pixelmon IP being used in other games, or other mediums that are being developed? How do you bring a character that's in Pixelmon to another game, and maybe is there anything coming up around that?
Yeah, look, we are big fans of interoperability. We do underline that kind of like it needs to make sense. I don't think mashing up IPs is good for IPs, but I do think that. So, okay, there's two layers to it now. Okay, so if you've got like a Nifty Island open world thing, and that is the concept of it, we've actually given the Nifty team all of our 3D assets, just to use them. No barriers here. But if instead, and we are building our own Fortnite engine subworld, and hence then uploading all of those assets there to be reused. But if it's like a more tailored ecosystem, so imagine tailored game like what D Labs is building, then what we usually do is say, okay, the cameo needs to make a bit of sense. So it can be a skin or it could be something else. And usually within our roster of characters, there's one that is a bit different from the rest, and it's Kevin. And back here. Kevin is this little green monster that became the symbol of the kind of the collection and some of the irony around Web3 games back in 2022. And yeah, Kevin is his own personality. I think he's listening to us, by the way, here on Spaces. We've got Kevin there.
I see him.
Yeah, I see him below. Hey, Kevin.
So give Kevin a follow. He's got some interesting content there. He's trying to become a streamer himself. So let's see other uses of AI there. We do a lot of Kevin cameos because Kevin, from an IP standpoint, he represents more Web3 gaming than he does, or NFTs, than he does the Pixelmon IP, I think sometimes. So he's been appearing in a lot of games. We had a big shooter out of Korea, X Society, just build Kevin skins. So you've got this massive troll-like monster and a horde of shooters jumping off a spaceship with Kevin helmet hats. So we're doing that. We're open to that. Ping us if you want to. Yeah.
For sure. I just want to dive more into the game mechanics now. So I was watching an interview with you and Patrick Dang on the Parallax, right? And you were saying that on the Web3 side of gaming, there's obviously the fungible side and the non-fungible essences in a game. So as a Web3 native studio, right, what's your mental model on leveraging both the fungible and the non-fungible Web3 primitives and doing them in a way that attracts the right type of players, attracts the right type of behavior, and ultimately makes the game more fun than if it had just been a normal Web2 game?
So I'll start with a premise that I think the answer to this is actually a emotion, meaning I think it's a lot more about trying and seeing what sticks to the wall. So I think the real answer to this question is Web3 games need to have stronger analytics infrastructure on their games than Web2 ones. Mostly because we don't know the answer to most of the things we will be testing when it comes to fungible and non-fungible interactions. And because the number of data points increases because you have off-game, on-chain data points to track. But with that in mind, what we are trying to do is create an ecosystem where what we want to incentivize is not, so it's not play to earn, it's not play to mint. It is play for fun, but it also is all three things. So our belief is that ultimately for non-fungible items to make sense in a game and make sense being on-chain, because if you're just making that like, okay, the right to accumulate more points by having an NFT, why does it need to be on-chain? Let's be honest. Like, then what you really need to stimulate is a very strong real economy of needs, of demand and supply. So of needs and satisfactors of those needs between players. So effectively, you need to create an ecosystem where certain players do certain things that are useful to other players. And if you, so, you know, the first iteration of Web3 games was players were playing without doing things that were useful to other players. But they were receiving token of the game. The whole ecosystem was growing, but ultimately there was no quid pro quo. So there was no real economy. MMOs, card games, they are the ones that make the most sense in that direction because you start realizing how it's much simpler to create a transaction ecosystem between players. What you want is you want Jacob to develop something, either a character, a strength, a personality, a sword, that Andrea, who is a different type of player, either because he fulfills a different role, or because And it could be as simple as Jacob is a mage, Andrea is an archer, MMO old-timers, and they kind of fulfill different use cases for each other. Or it can be Jacob likes hunting Pixelmons, developing them. Andrea has deeper pockets, doesn't like to wants to invest less time in the game but more outcome, and so he's a paying player who buys assets from Jacob. And then you have a situation where, so the way that developers are doing that now in free to play is they're creating a weird relationship where Jacob is grinding to get to a certain point, while Andrea is paying the developer for shortcuts to that point. And the developer is in a way is kind of, so Jacob isn't super happy because somebody can overtake him. And Andrea also isn't super happy because the developer is there always trying to squeeze him for money. At its extreme. But instead, what you're trying to create is a relationship between Jacob and Andrea, and the developer is instead a platform provider. And as a platform provider, they operate more like Visa and MasterCard than as the merchant on Visa and MasterCard. So ideally, developers stop being the merchant and start being the platform providers. The closest thing to something like this is Roblox. That's why I think off-chain, they've already taken this system quite far ahead in one declination and genre of it. And then so that's the non-fungible part. And then the fungible part makes a lot more sense once you've got that in place, because the fungible part is the ultimate underlying denominator, whether it's in-game or off-game. It represents a way to get into the ecosystem in a more asset agnostic way. So you don't have to choose if I buy a sword or bow and arrows or a rune, and it helps maintain all players in the economy aligned. But I think the hard part to solve is the non-fungible part. If you solve it, then you've solved the fungible one.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for diving into this. So on that same note, how are you thinking about some of these mechanics being built directly into Pixelmon, and what are some examples of that being present in the Pixelmon universe?
So we are doing this differently by game. So if I think about our bigger game, which is our flagship is going to be Hunting Grounds, which is going to be a turn-based RPG. That turn-based RPG effectively says that each character needs to have a very big roster of creatures. And I'm hyper simplifying it here, but we will have two layers of needs between players. There's many other sub layers, but the biggest ones and easier to explain on a quick podcast is, first of all, you'll be able to train creatures and trade them with each other at every layer. And that is particularly important also to solve duplications. So if you have two of the same, it will help that way. And that is within the non-ranked league. Non-ranked league means non-paying players or small amount playing players. What we then wanted to create was also a strong esports layer, but we wanted that esports layer to have a symbiotic relationship with the non-ranked one. And hence what we're designing is essentially a system where the ranked league needs assets from the non-ranked league to progress. So then you're going to have the esports league with massive, so think an esports league with massive prizes, multi-million USD per season, where the progression is dependent, yes, on skill, yes, on grind, but can be accelerated not by normal esports league, you buy a bunch of shit from the developer, but by buying a bunch of shit. I don't know if I can say shit on this podcast. I don't know where you guys land on that.
No, totally fine. Totally fine.
Buy a bunch of shit from the non-ranked league. So now imagine that to upgrade my Borg in ranked league, I need to buy hundreds of Borgs from the free-to-play players and burn them. So we stop trying to use the ranked league like most esports do for max monetization, and we start using them for max contribution to the free-to-play economy. What you want to create is effectively a system where the ranked league creates a demand towards the free-to-play players, and then your free-to-play players grows, and your prize pool for the ranked league grows. That's the highest level, most simplistic way of explaining it.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome. Yeah. I only have about 8 or so minutes left here, and I want to be conscious of your time, Julio. We focused a lot on sort of like the gamer developer sort of connection and relation. I do want to ask you also a bit about the creator side and get some of your thoughts there. When you are sort of developing Pixelmon and sort of fostering a community to contribute, what do you see is the incentive for creators to create new Pixelmon, new designs, new worlds, that kind of thing, and contribute to the game? Is it more about sort of a passion for the game? Is it a passion for just creating lore? Is it maybe a monetary incentive? Or how do you view the creator incentive, and how do you get more creators building the Pixelmon universe?
Yeah, so on that side of things, I think for now we've kept it, I think, a bit simplistic in the sense that we've used our fungible incentive. And what I was talking about earlier, so the badges system. You've contributed, you get a badge. Another layer, and that badge then participates to airdrops. Very interesting. The other layer that though we are putting in place is, and again, I'll be simplistic. I'll tell you what it should ideally be. But the other layer that we're putting in place is soft layer. So think you have you make up the story of an NPC. We name that NPC based on you or your username in the game. You design a city or a location. We name that location based on where you were born, whatever. Or there's a plaque somewhere in it. So there's a lot of soft stuff that we can do. But that's not innovation, to be very transparent. So I think innovation is getting to the point where the actual contribution is an on-chain asset, and its users are tracked. This is what Story Protocol is doing, from my understanding, and creating essentially also a fragmentation of that. So if from a character, then I want to make a story, the story is per se the character is an on-chain asset, and the story will be an on-chain asset that will have a connection somehow to the original character. So that's the ideal setup. Imagine it, for example, in our world as if you contribute new creature designs for our generation 2 of creatures, and one of those is selected by the DAO, when it goes into the game, the asset is constructed in such a way that every time we sell a skin for that character, you earn some royalties. So then you have, I'm just making an example. Imagine a layer 1 ETH NFT that represents the mother character, the IP character. And then you have layer 2 NFTs in game. Every time X money is spent on them, the layer 1 character gets airdrops. You take it one step further, you could do that with map locations. You take one step further, you could do that with stories that happen on map locations with that character. The name escapes me, but I remember a actually startup using Story Protocol that is doing something similar with worlds, characters, stories. A16Z backed, if I remember correctly. But and now the question is, how do you bring it from static to real-time dynamic? We actually, around a year ago, there was a lot of talk about how to do this with our IP NFTs and our revenue sharing mechanism, because the economic mechanisms are clear. The tech layers to make that happen in a real-time game, less so at this point in time. But that's directionally how I would like to do it down the line.
Awesome. Just want to tiny intermission. We have the POAP open for the next 10 minutes. So Jacob will share the code in his tweet, and we'll pin it to the chat. Jacob, what is the code again?
Yeah, I just sent a tweet out on my account. It is material-third-low. That is the POAP code. If you download the POAP app, you can click the plus button and input that code into where it says secret code, and you should be able to claim the POAP. So you can do it directly through the app. Again, it's material-third-low.
Yeah, and the claiming is going to be available for the next 10 minutes. Now, a bit less, 8 minutes. Giulio, you know, what's your? It seems like you've split Pixelmon right now in two departments, like the hyper casual games and the AAA games, which I think in some interviews you defined as mid-core, right? Like Hunting Grounds and Warriors of Novathera. What's next for the Pixelmon IP, and when story?
For the Pixelmon IP, I think the next big thing is happening in 2 to 3 weeks when we're releasing our a Play Store title in collaboration with a partner. So an Android casual game. Think about it as a tycoon genre game.
Nice.
Quite popular right now. The big moment for us game-wise is going to be Gamescom. Gamescom is the biggest gaming conference happening in Europe, in Cologne, around the 20th of August. And there we are displaying actually all 4 of our games, all playable, including for the first time the mobile RPG Hunting Grounds. 300,000 people visit Gamescom, and they're a crowd that usually doesn't love Web3 games. So we're bracing for impact, and we're putting our best foot and our best product forward. We are discussing with the story team how to start going a lot deeper into our comic generation and our animation storylines and our short storylines. We've just released our shorts on TikTok. 12,000 people like them. Very different type of crowd and genre, but we're there. Of course, in between this, for the Web3 community, there's another big event, which is instead happening very short term, which is our the fungible piece of our ecosystem, the token Mon, which is both the publisher and ecosystem token, is going live. The market is jitterish and there's never a right time, but we just decided to push ahead. So it's happening very soon. But I like to distance myself from that because, yeah, it's very, very important. But ultimately, we're here to build products and stories.
For sure. And maybe one last question. We don't have to dive too much into Mon specifically, but I do think it's going to be a core part of how you define yourselves as a DGIO, right? Like a decentralized game IP ownership. I'd love your thoughts on how you're structuring this mentally and practically. Like, how do you make a game decentralized from an IP standpoint? And what would you love to see? Like if you could imagine your perfect, world, and let's say it's thanks to story, obviously, but if you could imagine the perfect way in which IP flows through your games and out of your games, and in a programmable way, obviously, how do you picture it?
So I think we are still very far from being able to decentralize governance of a game while keeping it fun. I think so I think there are layers that need to be democratic and layers that are better not. I think at a product level, we should not be democratic. At deciding who drives the product and what products we make and what goes into those products, we should be democratic. And by democratic, I mean we should be decentralized. We should let the IP be governed by the community. And I think I actually like to use the word protected by the community, because I really think that early base of fans that contribute to it are the protectors. And most IPs have been ruined when they were taken on by the wrong commercial interests down the line. Not ruined, because you don't ruin an IP, but have delivered subpar products or not non-community fit products. Think the latest Witcher and other stuff. Sorry, nerd in me. So what we are doing is we're letting the community participate. We're planning to let the community, through sub-DAOs, vote on new product building decisions and licensing decisions. But once licensed, we're not going to have the community tell Uniqlo how to design that t-shirt, if you want a straightforward example. Now, I think there is a level in our imagination where we can imagine a massive MMO that is actually governed by players. I think that exists. So it is a second life to the square. But we have to be realistic to embark onto something that is, we're not there yet. Let's keep that in our imagination, but build progressively towards it. I think it's a big mistake that a lot of people in this space have made, to try and build a AAA massive dream before being able to chew onto one bite of what we've got ahead of us.
And what about the second part of the question, which is the role of the community in creating the IP, and how would you, also going back to your earlier points about the fungible side, the demand and supply, all of that was really related to gameplay aspects. How do you think the IP side also fits into this?
Yeah. So we think that effectively when the IP has been built by a community, and the IP is the product that ultimately allows us to generate revenues through the fungible side, then the community that built it should be rewarded proportionally to their contribution. So effectively, imagine it this way. Back to the example of earlier, if you design a character, you help design a character, and you ultimately own the IP level NFTs, we call them, of that character, the more that character is effectively IP that you license to the ecosystem. And when you license IP to the ecosystem, you should receive royalties if that IP contributes revenue to the ecosystem. So if you're putting, let me put it this way, if you design a new Pokemon and put it into Pokemon, the more plushies they sell, the more they should reward you. And if you do the same thing with Pixelmon, we will reward you. That's already the terms and conditions of our NFTs. We call it fractional IP, but effectively what we're enabling is community royalties. Because the content is, we own the Pixelmon trademark, but we don't own the Pixelmon IP. Everything inside there is actually licensed to us by the community.
Interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it, and lends itself well to having it. So I think now I finally get what you mean by decentralized game IP ownership. Cool. Well, I think it's time to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Giulio, for taking the time to speak with us. I think we could go on talking with you for at least another 6 hours. We have like 6 pages of questions that we didn't get to, unfortunately, but hopefully another time, maybe in a future episode, we can, as Pixelmon evolves, we can maybe have different conversations and about different aspects and go into a bit more detail. But I think this was a fascinating, breadth over depth view of how you think about IP, about how IP is a crucial part of creating an open world and a collaborative world building effort. And also, I really liked your take on the Web3 gaming aspect, right? It's much more than just sticking Web3 in a game and calling it a day. it's finding that right demand and supply so that it's player versus player and not, a platform versus player, and creating that actual organic economy. So that was also really, really interesting. And I think a lesson for every game developer, regardless of whether it's in Web3 or not. Cool. Jacob, any
Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed the conversation. As you said, maybe the next one when we have a story integrated and we can start actually tracking every little piece of contribution, not just the features.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Yeah, just want to say again, thank you, Julio. It was truly a pleasure. And look forward to building with you and seeing what you have next.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.